Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to Apply. All right, so today's a very special episode. I have Robert Bitterman on the line, and he is CEO and president over at Phio Pharmaceuticals. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Adam.
All right. So for everybody listening, this is a special edition of Mission Matters. This is part of our DealFlow Discovery Conference series, where we bring you the best of those that will be attending the DealFlow event and participating. That for anybody that's just catching up with this series, that's going to be January 28th to 29th at the Borgata in Atlantic City, New Jersey. You can learn more at DealFlowDiscoveryConference.com. All right, Robert, let's dive right in here. I know that we've done some work on prepping for this one, and you know the deal, and so does the audience. We'll start this episode the way that we start them all, with what we like to call our Mission Matters Minute. So at Mission Matters, our aim and our goal is to amplify stories for entrepreneurs, for executives, for experts. That's what we do. Robert, what mission matters to you?
Our mission is to create new pathways toward a cancer-free future. And we're trying to do that by finding ways within our body's own natural defenses to make our immune cells more effective at killing cancer cells. That's our mission, and I'd like to tell you about it today.
Amazing. Glad to have mission-based individuals on here to share why they do what they do, how they're doing it, and really what we can all learn from that so we grow together. So again, great to have you on. Let's go back a bit here, Robert. So, when did you get started in this business, and even on this path, where'd all of that start for you?
Well, actually, I've been in the pharmaceutical business going back probably since 1977, so I'm dating myself. But with regard to the current company in Phio, I was involved as chairman of the board dating back to around 2013, playing more of a governance role at that time. Mm-hmm. And about not quite 3 years ago, the board had approached me and asked me if I would take over the role of president and CEO of the company. And I thought that would be a great opportunity. I was kind of coming out of semi-retirement and collected a few individuals that I'd worked with in the past to form a great team. And here we are.
Amazing. I want to stick on that point a little bit longer here, because there's a lot in that. So what does it look like for you when you were pulling together that team of, I'm using this word you didn't, but the Avengers? In my mind, I'm like, you're attacking, you're going after cancer, you're bringing together the best of the best that you can for the project. Like, what does that look like for you to assemble the right team?
Well, over the years, you get a pretty good feel for people, their work ethic, their integrity, their likability, their ability to communicate with others. And I've had the great pleasure and fortune of working with a handful of people in my former companies that were willing to come and join me that are experts in drug development. And while at the time when we started this a few years ago, we were not experts in skin cancer, we did have many years of experience in the field of dermatology. Yeah. And with that, it was a good segue. And we got a number of people pretty excited about this technology that we think could change actually the paradigm for treating skin cancer going forward.
Yeah. And so with your background, as you mentioned, dating back to the 70s in this particular industry alone, a lot of different things you could have done, a lot of different companies you could have led. What made the Phio Pharmaceuticals opportunity attractive? What made this be like something where you're like, I can really do some good here? What was that like? Why did that happen?
Well, I think my background in the industry is very unlike most other people because I'm not a scientist. I'm not a physician. In fact, I never took a chemistry course in my life all through high school. But I was taught to be very curious in my education and found myself in the pharma industry and worked through a lot of different types of functions, from finance to marketing to some selling to investor relations and business development. And this was the benefit actually probably working in a large pharma company and getting scattered through a number of different businesses that were part of that company over the years. In the end, this opportunity presented itself when one of my former board members in a prior company asked me to come on and serve on the board. And at that point, I welcomed the opportunity and found that skin cancer is a pretty interesting place to be, since the incidence of it occurs more frequently than any other tumor in the body. So that's an awful lot of people. Like 1 in 5 Americans will have it by the time they're 70 years of age.
Wow. Can you go further into that? Because that's a good point. I don't want to assume that individuals know if they haven't had somebody in their family that maybe was afflicted, or, if they haven't had it themselves, then maybe they don't even know like what an issue it is. Can you go a little bit further in before we go into Phio further and what it's doing to help with the problem?
Yeah.
Like, what is the problem?
Well, as I mentioned, 1 in 5 people in the United States are going to be affected by this by the time they're 70 years of age. And
A
I
lot of
think one of the
people.
big,
A lot of
it
people.
is a lot. And that certainly keeps the dermatologists very busy.
Yeah.
But one of the challenges is that most people don't appreciate that they either may have it, and so therefore this goes undiagnosed for an extended period of time. And the earlier that's detected, the more likely it is to eliminate it. If you let it go, it progresses and it can become fatal eventually if you're not treating it. So that's a problem. And part of it is educating people to be aware, and also to try to convince people to avoid certain things that are natural issues that are going to create the problem. Excessive sun exposure, for example. And some of the obvious ones, like don't hang out in tanning beds, because it may make you look good, but not in the end, it's going to probably cause all sorts of problems. But it's a significant problem. More people need to be aware of it. And sometimes the general physician, the general practitioner is not always that familiar with what is a skin cancer lesion versus maybe just a normal mole or some other type of dermatological condition. So education is critically important, and it can become a life or death matter.
Is that how it's normally? Like, whenever I do an interview like this, I always kind of just think about myself, because most people do. I think when they listen to an interview or they listen to a podcast and they're thinking about, like, how does that relate to me? And I know you're not a physician, not asking you to diagnose or anything like that. I'm just curious. Is that how somebody normally finds out it's like a mole or it's a lesion or it's some like abnormality? Then they finally go get it checked out and then they find it. But if they don't have something that's like super obvious, maybe it doesn't get undiagnosed. I'm just trying to make sure I understand this.
Well, I think in the world of our skin, most dermatological conditions are visible, which is one of and that takes on a number of different forms. As you know, people are very cosmetic conscious, and there's a lot
Just
of different. In different parts of the country more so than others.
Yes, sir.
So if you're conscious of something that like a changing spot on your skin that may be taking the form of maybe coarse in texture, or it's expanding, or it's changing in color, those are warning signs that you really need to get that checked out. And it's, as I said, probably a good thing is for every individual to probably have a dermatologist skin check once a year, particularly as you get older. And if you're exposed certain, like for example, in different types of skin, you can have I'm of Northern European descent, so I have very light complexion skin. But it's more prevalent in Asians of lighter skin, but it's also prevalent in Black skin and in Asian skin as well as Hispanic skin. So no one is immune. And because of that, it's pretty important that you get this checked. And if you don't, as I said, letting it go can be fatal, really.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good wake-up call. I mean, when I think about like that, I don't think I've ever had a check or anything like that. That's interesting, and people should be doing this. I really didn't know that many individuals would be affected by it, but that's interesting. And then I think that is a big myth that you just kind of busted here, which is the idea that it's only a Caucasian like kind of thing, and that maybe it's not in other races. Because I've heard that, people aren't necessarily very educated on that piece of it, myself included. I'm learning a lot here. Hope our audience is as well. Let's switch it up here a bit. Now that we know, let's just say the groundwork looks like with the skin cancer situation, let's go into what Phio Pharmaceuticals is doing about it and how they're helping. So where do you want to start with that one?
Okay. So Phio is a early stage clinical development company today. Our focus is primarily on skin cancer, and within skin cancer, a particular form of it called cutaneous squamous cell carcinoma. It's a lot of words and a lot of syllables, but it represents the second largest incidence of skin cancers, or actually of any solid tumor, forget skin cancers, of any solid tumor in the human body. It's very prevalent. There's about 1.8 million incidents a year. What we do is our business model is driven by a technology widely patented. It's called INTASYL. And
Mm-hmm.
INTASYL is a short interfering RNA. Now, what is a short interfering RNA? It may sound like a lot of technical jargon, but I'm going to try to keep this pretty simple. If we think of the body's immune system and also our DNA is sending instructions to our various genes through RNA. And
Mm-hmm.
these instructions through RNA are telling our genes to do certain things, to produce protein, if you will. And sometimes those messages get out of whack. And excess levels of protein production, and in particular, a certain type of protein affecting skin cancer, when that happens, it causes our immune cells, our T cells, to basically start to become exhausted, to kind of go to sleep, and their activity becomes arrested. And when that happens, you no longer have an ability internally to fight a cancer cell because they don't recognize it. And so what our technology is doing is basically turning off that excess protein, almost like a faucet turning off water inside the T cell itself. And in so doing it, it allows the T cells to reawaken, to reinvigorate, and to go back and attack the cancer cells. And so we do this very simply through an injection of a very simple formula into the directly into the tumor itself, right into the tumor. And so we don't end up with a lot of other complications that other types of therapies would run into. So, for example, alternative therapies, depending on the stage of cancer, would be surgical intervention. And when you cut it out, that happens with certain complications for sure. The other approach is something which has been referred to as monoclonal antibodies. These are systemically infused throughout the entire body. And you might see on either TV or streaming services, there's a large pharma company that advertises the largest pharmaceutical product in the world, which is a biologic that they talk about. And at the very end of the commercial, they talk about for at least a minute and a half all of the various serious side effects you can get from that.
We've seen those.
So with that, what we're doing is we're delivering a drug directly into the tumor, not through the entire body, but just into the tumor. And we're delivering it through nothing other than buffered sterile saline solution.
Wow.
And so there's...
it's pretty targeted, right? Like it's not...
Oh, it is totally targeted. And I think what INTASYL does, and not to make this too complicated, but the technology really does three things, which are the basis of not only the intellectual property, but the way that it works effectively. One of these is a characteristic that allows the drug through the sterile solution to cross over the cell membrane and to get into where it's got to be deposited. And that's easier said than done because a lot of drugs require special formulations to basically penetrate past the cell to get to where it's got to go. But this one magically crosses the barrier. Okay. The other thing that it does is once it's deposited where it's supposed to be, it maintains its stability. Body is filled with different things that are trying to break down various drugs and in the body. It maintains stability long enough for the drug to target where it's supposed to go. And so the targeting is very precise in that we can specify exactly the messenger RNA that we want to shut off, to downregulate. And we can target that, only that. We can also avoid it targeting anything else. So that type of precision allows for a very effective approach with very minimal side effects, which is very in contrast to drugs that you would have to systemically infuse into your body, which cause different types of inflammatory autoimmune effects. So it's what we've demonstrated in our current clinical trial is that it is not only a very safe profile based on the absence of certain side effects, but also it's had some remarkably interesting efficacy results in a trial which wasn't really designed to even show efficacy yet.
Interesting. So speaking of trials and like where you're at with the company, maybe take us there next. And by the way, you've done an excellent job explaining this. I'm like, I have a certain level of background, but I'm like, I got it. I know my audience got it as well. It's amazing. And what I like about it too is just the idea behind it. If it's that targeted, that, and not making any medical claims or asking you to, of course, but if it's that targeted, you can kind of see what some of the benefits could be to not having some of those other side effects that we've seen on, on commercials, as I'll mention, for many other drug companies. So that's interesting to me. Were clinical trials going to maybe where you're at and the plans going forward for the company and for the treatment?
Yeah, if I could also, first let me say that, eventually when this product, if it has the good fortune to become commercialized, I'm sure we'll have certain things that we'll have to disclose in there as side effects as well, as this is studied in a greater population of people. So just to be fair and balanced on that.
Yeah.
But what I'd like to do is actually talk to you about how we ended up on this particular program. Because the company originally was more of a discovery company as opposed to a development company. And we had scientists that were figuring out how to manipulate the INTASYL technology to silence a variety of different compounds. And in that process, they ended up, there's at least 30 of them that silencing different types of genes. And when I was asked to take over this role about 3 years ago, I said, well, obviously, we're a small company. We have 7 individuals and a few experts that we contract with. And, is a small company of limited resources. I mean, we have to choose one. We have to do something amongst this group of 30 compounds that is going to ultimately make a medical difference, that it can play to our experience and skill set, and also provide a fair return for our investors at the same time. And where does the intersection of that happen? So we looked at various programs and we said, okay, we think that this particular protein called PD-1, which is implicated in skin cancer, and we knew that it was because that's what some of the larger pharma companies had identified as being a culprit in skin cancers. But they were using it in their monoclonal antibodies for really late stage cancers that were pretty serious. And they do a lot in the way of side effects that affect everything from autoimmune, from, cardiovascular system, the dermatological system, the gastrointestinal system. All of those things can be affected by the infusion of these drugs. So we said we can do this a better way because we established in preclinical studies that we didn't have those effects. We could directly cut off this drug, or not the protein at the source of it in the T cell. And as I mentioned before, turn it off like a faucet. So with that, we said, all right, this is the protein that we have, we've studied. We think we could basically get this to go through the FDA. And we then looked and said, how big is the market? And as I mentioned, there's 1.8 million incidences of cutaneous squamous cell. So the market was huge. And then we looked at what's the competitive landscape look like? If we had a different drug in this indication, would we be totally outweighed by some of the giants in the industry, or do we have something that's uniquely different that could be positioned? And so with that, we mitigated our risk. We said we'll go forward with this. We compiled the information, submitted what's called an investigational new drug application to FDA. And within a period of 30 days, the FDA gave us clearance to move forward and to study this in what at the time was both melanoma, Merkel cell, as well as cutaneous squamous cell. But we only thought we were going to get the ability to study this in the late stages of these diseases, where the patients had failed on everything else. And this was going to be their last resort. What the FDA came back and they said to us, we would like you to study your drug in early stages 1 and 2 of cutaneous squamous cell.
Interesting.
And so why was that? Well, we were surprised, but the reality is that there's no other FDA approved drug to treat stages 1 and 2. And the standard of care for those stages is surgical intervention. And so we looked at this and said 70% of the incidence is in stages 1 and 2 of this cutaneous squamous cell.
That's the bulk of the market.
The bulk of it, for sure. And if we don't treat it, we know that it will progress from stage 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. And is there a need for an alternative to surgery? And the surgery was certainly an attractive thing for the derm surgeons. They basically the bread and butter. But based on the patient and the size of the lesion and where it's placed on the body and also the general health of the patient. Sometimes surgical option is not going to be a good choice.
Yeah.
And so we saw this as an opportunity to come in and, if not to shrink the tumor, possibly even eliminate it. And that's what we were hoping to achieve when we undertook this study. But the initial study was really just it's called a phase 1B, which is basically to prove safety. FDA is trying to find a dose beyond which it's not particularly healthy for a patient to absorb the dose.
Yeah.
And then anything else you see in addition to that is a plus. But we basically embarked on the study where we included some. We had one melanoma patient, one Merkel cell patient, but all the rest of them were cutaneous squamous cell. And these were basically the size of a lesion, about 3 centimeters in length or a little bit less. And first thing we found is that we had to increase our dose. That was required by the agency to see if they could find a dose, we could find a dose that would not be acceptable. We increased the dose 20-fold over 5 different groups of patients. We found no serious adverse events. And we can't put any more drug into that sterile saline anymore. That's as high as we can go.
Yeah.
So that gave us very good comfort on safety. And that study, by the way, is now completely enrolled at this point, and much of the data is in. So, but looking at the efficacy, which would be, as we define it, what's called pathology. This is the reduction of cancer in those lesions. Okay, separate and distinct from safety. The pathology in the cutaneous squamous cell, out of 16 patients that had cutaneous squamous cell, 6 of them had 100% pathology clearance in a matter of 4 injections over 3 weeks and an observation at the 5th week.
Yeah.
2 of them, 100% clear. 2 of them had greater than 90%, and another 2 had greater than 50%. So the response rate was about 62.5% in that particular type of cancer cell, with 4 of those being 90% or greater. I mean, it was quite surprising and significant in terms of what the medical community and the investor community was seeing. And with that, also, we saw that those who did not respond, which was the other 37%, the disease did not progress over the course of the study either. So it didn't get any worse. So those were pretty fascinating results and gave us a lot of optimism to where we're going to go next. And that takes us to, I think, your other question, which is, what are your next steps? So we have now, by the time we're completed, there's a few patients still wrapping up their treatment session at this point. But we'll have treated 22 patients, which is a normal size for a study under the description of a phase 1B.
Yeah.
And when that's completed, all of this information will then be compiled in data tables and listings where they'll look at patients, look at their the sex, they'll look at the size of the lesion, they'll look at the placement on the body. All of these factors get compiled into a massive statistical analysis to then be presented to FDA sometime toward the end of the first quarter. And we'll ask them for what they believe should be our next steps to progress the study to the next level. So that'll be the next step. And what we're hoping is that the FDA will give us the opportunity to move to what would be called a phase 2B3 clinical pivotal trial that would basically be a basis for ultimately, determining whether or not the drug could be actually approved and commercialized down the road. So that would be our next step.
What is the, as far as you'd care to go into this, what's the opportunity for investors? Are you still allowing, what does that piece of it kind of look like?
Well, we're publicly listed on the NASDAQ under the symbol PHIO, which is the same as the name of the company, which is kind of fortunate.
Yeah.
We always have to be looking to raise additional funding. The cost of doing clinical trials is very expensive. We recently completed a capital raise a few weeks ago, and this should carry us well into the mid 2017 era. So we've got about a year and a half of adequate cash to take this through some of the next steps.
Yeah, 2027, yeah?
Yeah, the middle of 27.
Perfect.
We will still at that point in time, we'll still be in the midst of what hopefully will be the final pivotal trial, which will require additional patients. But to give you a sense of scope, probably a pivotal trial is, our best guess at this point, and it's not a guess, but it's based on expert advice, is that the FDA will probably want about 160 patients in that trial. So this becomes a much bigger undertaking. But with the first trial behind us, with the experience on safety and efficacy, it'll be an interesting effort to get there, but we should be able to pull that off, and eventually, we maintain the same safety profile, we'll be in good shape. But funding, you always have to basically make sure you have enough funding to do this. And we could start other programs in the pipeline too. But we don't want to lose focus on this primary one initially. So that's where our money's going.
Amazing. Now, I know you're going to be at the DealFlow Discovery Conference. I know people can definitely connect with your team there. And just to repeat for everybody listening, this is going to be at the Borgata in Atlantic City on January 28th and 29th. Again, it's DealFlowDiscoveryConference.com. And you can check out tickets and all the other good stuff so you can attend. And I think they have some specials for accredited investors and otherwise to be able to come out and to meet with companies like Robert's. But Robert, if somebody wants to follow up and they want to connect directly with your team, how do they do that? How do they connect? What's the best way to reach out?
Well, one of the best ways is to go to our website, which is www.phiopharma.com. And in there is a significant amount of information in terms of not only contact, but also explains some of the conditions that we're talking about in greater detail. There's other investor presentations that are updated periodically in there, so you can learn much more about the company, who the team is, what we do, what our backgrounds are, all of that. That's probably the best place to get that.
Fantastic. And for everybody watching, just so you know, we'll definitely put some links in the show notes so that you can just click on them and go check it out. Speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Each and every day, we're putting out new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way on your journey. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Robert, man, it has really been a pleasure having you on the show today. I know I learned a lot. I hope our audience did as well. Thank you for making some time for us today.
Yeah, Adam, thank you very much. I enjoyed it. It was great. Thank you.